Have you ever sat alone in your room, the world still outside your window, and felt a strange kind of peace? The soft hum of the evening, the quiet light spilling across the floor, the sound of your own breathing, steady, familiar. You scroll for a second, then stop. The noise of everything feels too much, and in that small moment of silence, something in you exhales. You're not lonely, you're not hiding, you're simply home. Most people might never understand that feeling. They fill every empty space with sound because silence makes them uneasy. But for some of us, silence is not empty at all. It's where everything begins to make sense. I used to think there was something wrong with me for liking that quiet. Friends would ask why I stayed in, why I disappeared for days just to think or write or walk by myself. I didn't know how to explain that being alone doesn't drain me, it restores me. It's not that I don't love people, I just need space to return to myself after being around them. The more I learned about psychology, the more I realized I wasn't broken, I was simply built differently. A study from the University of Virginia once found that many people would rather receive a small electric shock than sit quietly with their thoughts for just 15 minutes. That says a lot about how afraid we've become of stillness. But for those who like to be alone, that stillness isn't punishment, it's medicine. When you spend time alone, you start to hear the parts of yourself that the world usually drowns out. The thoughts you've ignored, the emotions you've pushed aside, they rise slowly in the quiet and finally have space to breathe. You realize you don't always need validation to know who you are. You begin to see patterns, the way you give, the way you protect yourself, the way you love. Alone, you start to rebuild the relationship you have with yourself, one honest thought at a time. And that's not isolation, that's awareness. Carl Jung once wrote, "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes." For many of us, solitude is exactly that, the awakening. People who enjoy being alone often carry a calm strength that the world mistakes for distance. They think deeply, feel deeply, and move quietly. They notice the tone behind someone's words, the sadness behind a smile, the beauty in small, forgotten things. They don't crave the spotlight because they've learned to find meaning in reflection. They are loyal without needing attention, kind without seeking credit, brave enough to face their own thoughts. Their confidence isn't loud, it's steady. Their peace doesn't depend on who stays or leaves. It's something they built when no one was watching. So, if you've ever chosen a quiet night over a crowded room, or felt more yourself walking alone than talking endlessly, this is for you. You're not strange for needing space. You're simply in tune with a part of life that moves slower, deeper, and truer. In the next few minutes, we'll explore the 12 special personality traits that people like you, people who find strength in solitude, often share. And as we do, you might realize that being alone isn't a weakness to fix, but a wisdom to understand. Because sometimes the quietest people are the ones who have learned to listen not just to others, but to themselves. When we talk about people who like being alone, we often picture quiet rooms, calm mornings, or long walks under the open sky. But beneath that calm surface lies something deeper, a long journey from dependence to autonomy. It's not that these people never needed others, it's that at some point they learnt the cost of depending too much. Many of us were taught early that love means closeness, that success means belonging, that happiness means being surrounded, so we tried. We joined, we blended, we shaped ourselves to fit what others wanted sometimes, until we could barely recognize who we were underneath it all. And then, one day, silence started to feel safer than pretending. That's where solitude begins, not as an escape, but as recovery. Psychologically, this shift is called self-differentiation, the ability to stay connected to others without losing your sense of self. Dr. Murray Bowen, who developed this idea, described it as knowing where you end and another person begins. For people who like to be alone, solitude becomes the space where that line becomes clear again. In the quiet, you can finally ask, what do I feel? What do I want? What's truly mine? And what's just noise I picked up along the way? When you spend enough time with yourself, something subtle changes. You stop needing approval as proof of worth. You stop chasing connection out of fear of being forgotten. Instead, connection starts to mean honesty, showing up as you are, not as who someone else expects you to be. That's what autonomy looks like. It's not rebellion, it's quiet self-respect. But this transition isn't always peaceful. It can feel lonely before it feels free. The world doesn't always understand people who pull back to recharge. They label it cold, distant, or detached. What they don't see is the courage it takes to pause, to face your own reflection without distraction. Because when you sit alone long enough, you begin to notice the things you've been running from, the voices that told you you're not enough, the pressure to keep performing, the fear of losing love if you change. And that's where healing begins. Solitude gives you the courage to listen to yourself again. Even when what you hear is uncomfortable, it lets you rebuild trust with the only person you truly have to live with yourself. You start creating small boundaries, not as walls, but as shapes of self-respect. You begin saying no without guilt and yes without fear. You realize that being alone doesn't make you less connected. It makes every connection that remains more meaningful. True autonomy isn't about isolation. It's about presence. It's about standing fully in who you are, even when you're surrounded by silence. The people who like being alone understand that kind of strength. They're not running away from the world, they're walking toward themselves. There's a certain calm that comes only after years of noise, not the silence of avoidance, but the silence of balance. For people who like to be alone, that calm isn't a wall, it's a rhythm. In solitude, their emotions settle, their thoughts find order, and their sense of self returns. This quiet space reveals 4 hidden strengths that shape how they feel, think, and connect with the world. 1. Emotional independence. People who enjoy solitude are deeply self-regulated. They've learned to soothe their own nervous system without depending on external reassurance. In a world addicted to validation, they no longer wait for hearts, likes, or applause to know they're enough. Their peace doesn't need witnesses. Psychologically, this is called self-medication, the ability to feel safe inside your own emotions. When they sit alone, their breathing slows, their heart rate evens, and the body remembers it's safe. Solitude becomes a reset button for emotional energy, a moment when calm isn't something they chase, but something they generate. 2. Deep self-reflection. Those who like to be alone don't just think, they think in layers. Their inner world is organized like a story they keep rewriting, one insight at a time. In solitude, they trace the roots of their emotions. Where did this fear begin? What memory still speaks through my choices? Psychologists call this the narrative self, the capacity to make meaning from experience. Far from overthinking, this structured reflection turns confusion into clarity. That's why people who embrace solitude often seem wise beyond their years. They've had countless quiet conversations with themselves before the world ever asked them a question. 3. Focus and flow. When everything goes quiet, their minds come alive. Solitude creates the perfect conditions for flow, that deep state of focus where time disappears and the mind feels weightless. Whether they're writing, building, painting, or simply thinking, they experience a subtle rush of dopamine, not from approval, but from mastery itself. The outside world might call it isolation. They call it immersion. In that state, they're not escaping reality, they're shaping it. The quiet isn't boring, it's where ideas breathe. 4. Empathic understanding. Ironically, the people who spend the most time alone often understand others the most. Because they've learned to listen inwardly, they can read the smallest emotional signals outwardly. The tremor in a voice, the shift in someone's eyes. Their empathy is refined, not loud. They don't absorb every feeling around them. Solitude has taught them boundaries. They know when compassion becomes self-drained, and they protect their peace without guilt. That balance between openness and self-respect is what makes their empathy sustainable. Together, these qualities create what psychologists call internal security, a steady sense of being safe within yourself. That's why solitude doesn't make them distant, it makes them centered. They move through life without clinging or performing, guided by quiet self-trust. So when we look at people who like to be alone, we're not seeing detachment, we're seeing emotional mastery, independence without coldness, reflection without rumination, focus without obsession, empathy without exhaustion. The peace they carry isn't the absence of feeling, it's the presence of balance. And that, in a noisy world, is one of the rarest strengths of all. There's a quiet rhythm in the way people who like to be alone move through the world. They don't scatter their attention across every noise. They direct it carefully, like light through glass. Their solitude has taught them something rare. The energy once spent doesn't return the same way. They've learned to protect it, to give it only where it can grow. These next 4 traits show how solitude refines their social world, their calm, their creativity, and their vision. Kind, selective social energy. People who enjoy solitude are selective, not distant. They know connection isn't about how many people you have around you, but how safe you feel with them. Each conversation, each presence carries energy, and they sense that exchange vividly. Too many surface interactions exhaust them, but one real conversation can light them up for days. Psychologists describe this as emotional energy regulation, the ability to protect your cognitive and emotional bandwidth. So they choose small circles, honest talks, meaningful silence. It's not isolation, it's intention. They give fewer people their time, but those few get the best of them. 6. Calm presence. Spend a few minutes near someone who's made peace with solitude, and you'll feel it. There's a steadiness in their tone, a groundedness in their body language. They rarely rush, rarely react. Their calm isn't passive, it's practiced. Through years of self-regulation, they've trained their nervous system to return to balance on its own. Science calls this parasympathetic activation, the body's way of signaling safety and rest. That's why being near them feels easy. Your own body mirrors their peace. They don't calm rooms by speaking, they calm them by existing. 7. Creative thinking. While the world fills every gap with noise, these people understand that silence is not empty, it's generative. Their creativity doesn't come from chaos, but from quiet focus. When the mind is alone, the default mode network activates, the brain's reflective system that links memory and imagination. In that inner stillness, ideas connect, patterns emerge, and insight flows. That's why solitude often births art, solutions, or healing perspectives. They don't chase inspiration, they make space for it. To them, stillness isn't stagnation, it's preparation. 8. Observant and Perceptive. Because they spend so much time watching the world instead of competing with it, solitary people notice what others overlook. They read micro-expressions, feel shifts in tone, remember subtle details. It's not overthinking, it's presence. This high sensitivity allows them to process external signals deeply without reacting impulsively. They listen more than they speak, and when they finally do, their words carry weight. Their perception comes not from distance but from attention, the kind that only quiet minds can afford. Together, these four traits shape a social rhythm that's both peaceful and powerful. People who like to be alone aren't disconnected, they're selectively connected. They choose people who bring clarity, environments that preserve calm, and activities that awaken creation. They live slower but more intentionally, seeing details others blur past. Their solitude isn't a retreat from life, it's a way to engage with it more honestly, because once you've learned to protect your energy, to steady your presence, to create in silence, and to see deeply, you no longer need to chase the world. You simply meet it, one quiet, authentic moment at a time. If the first traits reveal how solitude nurtures calm and creativity, the next four show what that calm becomes: strength. People who like to be alone are not waiting for direction, they lead themselves. Their solitude isn't an escape from responsibility, it's training for it. Through stillness, they've built the discipline, trust, and authenticity that most people search for in others. These traits don't just define how they think, they define how they live. 9. Inner discipline. People who enjoy being alone often have quiet routines that keep them grounded. They don't rely on external pressure to move, they set their own rhythm. Psychologists call this an internal locus of control, the belief that your actions shape your life more than luck or approval. They wake up early not to impress anyone, but to feel aligned. They work in silence because focus feels sacred. Over time, this becomes more than habit, it's self-leadership. They've learned that freedom isn't doing whatever you want, it's mastering what you choose. 10. Self-trust. Those who thrive in solitude develop a deep trust in their intuition. They've spent enough time listening inward to know the difference between fear and instinct. When faced with decisions, they don't rush for opinions, they pause, observe, and act from inner clarity. In psychology, this process mirrors self-efficacy, confidence built from real experience. Their choices aren't reckless, they're rooted in pattern recognition. They know what peace feels like, and anything that disturbs it isn't for them. This quiet certainty can look mysterious from the outside, but it's simply the voice of someone who's learned to be their own compass. 11. Authenticity. For people who like to be alone, authenticity isn't a performance, it's a necessity. They've spent years unlearning the need to impress. Without the constant noise of comparison, they rediscover their own tone, their natural pace, their real interests. Psychologists call this self-integration, the alignment between your inner world and the face you show the world. It's not about being rebellious or different, it's about being congruent. They no longer chase approval because they've already met the one person they needed to convince themselves. And that quiet honesty draws others who value truth over noise. 12. Freedom. Above all, solitude teaches freedom, not the loud kind that rejects rules, but the subtle kind that rejects pretense. People who like to be alone don't measure success by comparison or applause. Their fulfillment comes from psychological safety, the ability to breathe, to create, to feel without performing. This freedom allows love and creativity to grow naturally because they come from choice, not pressure. When you're at peace in your own company, You stop chasing validation. You start choosing alignment. Together, these 4 traits form the architecture of self-leadership. Inner discipline builds momentum. Self-trust guides direction. Authenticity keeps the path clean. And freedom, real freedom, keeps the heart open. People who master solitude don't live without connection. They live without dependence. They can walk beside others without losing their balance, love without possession, and lead without noise. Their strength isn't loud or showy. It's steady, deliberate, and deeply human. In a world obsessed with constant interaction, they remind us that the highest form of connection begins within. Behind every love for solitude, there's a story. It's not just personality, it's psychology. People who like to be alone often share a quiet history. They learned early that peace can't always be found outside, so they built it inside. What looks like preference is often the result of emotional evolution, the mind's way of healing, adapting, and protecting itself. In attachment theory, there are different ways we learn to connect. Some grow up in secure bonds. They feel safe being close and safe being apart. Others, shaped by inconsistency or loss, develop patterns of anxious or avoidant attachment. Anxious types chase closeness to soothe fear. Avoidant types retreat to avoid pain. But there's a third path, one that people who like solitude often walk. It's not avoidance, it's awareness. They've learned to hold space for both connection and independence. For them, solitude isn't rejection, it's regulation. It's how they calm the nervous system when the world feels overstimulating. Psychologists call this self-soothing, the ability to restore safety from within. When others reach for noise, they reach for quiet. Their brains engage the parasympathetic system, the body's natural brake pedal, lowering stress hormones and bringing the mind back to balance. That's why, after time alone, they return, clearer, softer, and more present. But not all solitude heals. There's a thin line between healing solitude and defensive isolation. Healing solitude feels nourishing. Afterward, you feel full, grounded, more connected to life. Defensive isolation, however, feels numb, like shrinking instead of resting. One expands you, the other closes you. The difference lies in intention. People who practice healing solitude use it to listen and recharge, while those stuck in defensive isolation use it to hide from what still hurts. This distinction matters because solitude, like any medicine, depends on dosage and purpose. Too little, and you lose yourself in others. Too much, and you lose touch with the world. The healthiest form of solitude sits in the middle, a conscious practice of reflection and reconnection. When solitude is healing, it teaches emotional differentiation, the ability to feel deeply without being consumed. When it's defensive, it teaches avoidance, safety through distance, not understanding. People who have made peace with solitude usually learn to balance both sides. Maybe they grew up comforting themselves when comfort wasn't available. Maybe they turned inward when the outside world felt unpredictable. But somewhere along the way, they chose growth over retreat. They began using solitude not to escape the world, but to prepare to meet it again, calmer, wiser, and more whole. So if you find yourself craving quiet, don't rush to label it loneliness. Ask what it's giving you. Does it make you small, or does it help you breathe again? Does it close your heart, or clear space for something real to return? Solitude, when practiced with awareness, becomes a mirror. It shows you both your wounds and your wisdom. It's not about avoiding love, it's about creating the safety to love deeply without losing yourself. That's why certain minds prefer solitude, because they've discovered that peace built from within can't be taken away. When solitude becomes intentional, it turns from silence into strength. It's no longer a place to hide, but a space to grow, to reset, to listen, and to remember who you are when the world goes quiet. True solitude is not an escape from life, it's a way to live it more consciously. For people who love being alone, peace isn't something that happens by accident, it's something they cultivate. And like any practice that heals, it starts small. People who understand solitude know that calm doesn't come from doing nothing. It comes from doing the right things, slowly and with awareness. They build their peace not through grand gestures, but through small, consistent rituals, the kind that steady the mind and anchor the soul. These are not rules, but gentle rhythms, habits that transform quiet into clarity. Focus blocks, entering deep work and flow. Set aside 90 to 120 minutes each day to be fully present with one meaningful task. No notifications, no multitasking, no background noise. Psychologists call this state flow, the sweet spot, where challenge meets focus and time seems to disappear. In those hours, the mind aligns with purpose, the world fades, and what remains is the deep satisfaction of being absorbed in what matters. It's not about productivity, it's about presence, a way to train attention to become peace itself. Reflective journaling, 3 simple lines. Before bed, write just 3 sentences. What happened? What did I feel? What do I choose next? It sounds simple, but this act turns experience into wisdom. Naming emotions helps the brain process and release them, a function known in neuroscience as affect labeling. Over time, you'll begin to see the shape of your own story, the triggers, the truths, the moments you handled with quiet grace. Journaling for the solitary mind is not documentation, it's self-conversation. Selective connection, choosing your anchors. For those who thrive in solitude, 1 or 2 real relationships are worth more than 100 casual ties. These are the anchors, people who make silence feel safe, not awkward. They're the ones you can sit beside without needing to speak, whose presence grounds you. Psychology calls this secure attachment, the balance of independence and closeness. In solitude, you learn that love doesn't need constant noise. It just needs truth and presence. Sensory hygiene. Protecting your inner quiet. In a world of constant alerts and flashing screens, solitude also means guarding your senses. Our nervous system was never designed for so much stimulation. The antidote is simple. Step back. Take digital breaks. Sit in nature without headphones. Let your senses rest so your imagination can breathe again. This isn't withdrawal, it's repair. Every small act of sensory hygiene is a way of saying, I choose peace over performance. And when solitude begins to feel heavy, when quiet starts to lose its warmth, there's a gentle way back. Healing is not about staying positive all the time. It's about awareness. That's when the 4-step practice becomes a map. Acknowledge, understand, reframe, rebuild. Acknowledge what's happening without judgment. Understand what your silence is trying to protect. Reframe solitude as space, not distance. Rebuild connection slowly, starting first with yourself. These 4 steps transform solitude from defense to healing again. They remind you that peace isn't the absence of feeling. It's the ability to stay kind to yourself while feeling everything. Solitude, when practiced this way, doesn't harden you, it deepens you. It teaches you to carry stillness into movement, to hold calm even in the noise, to rebuild without rushing. Because the goal was never to disappear, It was to live in such a way that your inner quiet becomes unshakable, a calm presence rooted in authenticity and freedom, yet always open to connection. When solitude matures into strength, emptiness turns into space, and that space becomes light. There's a certain kind of quiet that doesn't feel cold, it feels alive. You know it if you've ever sat alone in your room late at night, the hum of the city fading into the background, a single light still on. You're not waiting for anyone, you're not escaping anything, you're simply there, breathing, existing, and realizing that this stillness doesn't feel empty at all. It feels full. Full of presence, full of truth, full of you. For a long time, the world taught us to fear this silence, to treat being alone as a flaw to fix. We were told to stay busy, stay connected, stay on. But when everything finally goes quiet and the noise of expectation fades, something else appears: clarity. You start to hear the sound beneath all the sound, your own heartbeat, steady and patient, reminding you that peace was never out there. It was always waiting here. Solitude, in its purest form, is like a light in an empty room. It doesn't need furniture or applause to shine. It just exists, softly, steadily, revealing the space rather than filling it. People who understand this kind of solitude don't chase validation. They don't rush to explain. They've learned that the quietest presence can be the most powerful one. Their peace is not loud, but it changes the temperature of a room when they walk in. If you look closely, you'll see that solitude has never been the opposite of love. It's where love begins. Love that isn't born from fear or performance, but from awareness. The kind of love that can say, "I'm okay here, and I'll still be okay when you leave." When you build peace from within, connection stops being about filling a void and starts being about sharing abundance. You stop grasping and start giving naturally, quietly, freely. That's the paradox of solitude. It makes you more connected, not less. When you spend time in your own company, you stop projecting your needs onto others. You stop expecting people to save you from your silence. And in that freedom, you can finally meet others with open eyes, not as rescues or mirrors, but as whole beings walking beside you. Real connection begins when loneliness ends. And loneliness ends when you stop abandoning yourself. So the next time you find yourself sitting alone in a park, on your bed, by the window as rain falls, don't rush to fill the moment, let it breathe. That quiet is not a punishment, it's a reunion. You're meeting the part of yourself that never left, the one that's been whispering under all the noise. You're safe, you're home. Solitude will not take you away from life. It will return you to it, clearer, calmer, more grounded. You will find that you no longer crave the spotlight because you've become the light. And that's what the world needs, not more noise, but more people who can stand still and shine quietly. Because in the end, being alone isn't about emptiness. It's about space. The kind of space where peace grows roots, where love learns to stay without fear, where the light you carry finally has room to expand. Solitude isn't the absence of love. It's where real love begins. So if this video found you at the right time, take a moment, breathe, reflect, and share in the comments which trait felt most like you. Maybe your story will help someone else feel a little less alone. And if you'd like to keep exploring the quiet side of the mind, subscribe not for noise, but for understanding. Because in this space, we don't run from silence, we learn to listen to it.